On Solitude by Michel de Montaigne quotes, On Solitude by Michel de Montaigne is an eloquent meditation on the nature of isolation, inner reflection, and the balance between public life and personal retreat. Written by one of the Renaissance's most influential essayists, Montaigne explores the need for solitude in order to achieve peace, clarity, and self-mastery. He critiques the ambitions of society, urging readers to turn inward and cultivate inner tranquility, free from the noise and chaos of public life. Montaigne does not advocate for complete withdrawal from society, but rather for creating a mental space where one can detach from external distractions and live authentically. This work reflects Montaigne's broader philosophical inquiry into how humans can live wisely, suggesting that solitude allows for deeper self-awareness and reflection, leading to a more fulfilling life. Quote 1. Let us venture to refer to those who have joined in the dance. Let them bare their consciences and confess whether rank, office, and all the bustling business of the world are not sought, on the contrary, to gain private profit from the common weal. Montaigne argues here that people who seek status and public office often do so not for the common good, as they claim, but for their personal benefit. Their pursuit of power and ambition typically masks selfish motives, which can undermine the broader social welfare. This critique encourages self-reflection about whether one's actions truly align with public interest or are driven by private gain. Quote 2. There is nothing more unsociable than man, and nothing more sociable. Unsociable by his vice, sociable by his nature. This quote encapsulates a key paradox of human nature. Montaigne suggests that while humans are inherently social and drawn to community by their natural disposition, their vices, such as ambition and selfishness, often make them unsociable. Human beings are thus torn between their instinctive desire for companionship and the device rooted in their personal flaws. Quote 3. Ambition, covetousness, irresolution, fear, and desires do not abandon us just because we have changed our landscape. Montaigne is expressing the idea that internal struggles, such as ambition and desire, follow us wherever we go. Changing one's physical environment does not rid a person of their inner turmoil. To achieve true peace and contentment, one must address these internal issues rather than merely seeking external change, like moving to a different place. Quote 4. If you do not first lighten yourself and your soul of the weight of your burdens, moving about will only increase their pressure on you, as a ship's cargo is less troublesome when lashed in place. Montaigne likens the human condition to that of a ship's cargo. He argues that emotional and psychological burdens will weigh more heavily if one is unsettled or constantly moving. Just as securing cargo on a ship makes it easier to manage, finding inner stability before making any changes in one's external circumstances is essential for inner peace. Quote 5. It is our own self we have to isolate and take back into possession. In this quote, Montaigne emphasizes that solitude is not just a physical state, but a mental one. True solitude, according to him, is the ability to reclaim and be content with oneself, free from external influences. This inward retreat is essential for self-mastery and true independence, which can be achieved even in the midst of society, as long as one is inwardly detached. Quote 6. Certainly, if he still has himself, a man of understanding has lost nothing. Here, Montaigne speaks to the power of inner fortitude. A person who retains control of their mind and self in the face of loss has not truly lost anything of value. External possessions, including loved ones and wealth, are fleeting, but maintaining one's own sense of self ensures that one remains whole, despite outward misfortune. Quote 7. We should not become so attached to them that our happiness depends on them. Montaigne asks for a detachment from material and personal possessions. He acknowledges that while we should value our relationships, health, and wealth, we should not allow our happiness to be entirely dependent on them. The idea is to cultivate inner strength and contentment, so that when losses occur, they do not shatter our peace of mind. Quote 8. It is in our soul that evil grips us, and she cannot escape from herself. Montaigne points out that the root of our troubles lies within us. Our soul is where negative emotions and thoughts originate, and no matter where we go, we carry this internal burden. The struggle to rid ourselves of these vices and struggles is an internal one, which cannot be solved by external changes or distractions. Quote 9. Why do we go against nature's laws and make our happiness a slave in the power of others? Montaigne questions why people allow their happiness to be dependent on external circumstances and other people's control. He suggests that true happiness should be self-sufficient, grounded in one's internal state, rather than reliant on external factors, which are often beyond our control. This encourages a shift towards self-reliance and detachment from the external world for inner peace. Quote 10. Neither reason nor nature will have them so. Montaigne implies that reason and nature guide us toward a simpler, self-sufficient life, where our happiness is not bound by external fortunes. According to him, living according to these principles will prevent us from becoming dependent on unstable external conditions. The wise person, therefore, should focus on internal contentment and not allow outside influences to dictate their emotional well-being. Quote 11. We should not let them become our principal base, for they are no such thing. Montaigne stresses that while we can enjoy the good things life offers, such as wealth or success, we must not allow these transient aspects to form the foundation of our happiness. Relying on fleeting, external goods as the basis of contentment is perilous, because they can be taken away at any moment, leaving us vulnerable to misfortune. Quote 12. I know how far our natural necessities can extend, and when I reflect that the indigent beggar at my door is often more merry and healthy than I am, I put myself firmly in his place. Montaigne acknowledges that basic human needs are limited, and that happiness does not necessarily correlate with wealth. Observing the joy of a poor beggar compared to his own discomfort, he realizes that contentment often comes from an internal disposition rather than material wealth. He urges himself and others to adopt a mindset of gratitude and simplicity, finding satisfaction in less. Quote 13. As for glory, the end proposed by Pliny and Cicero, that is right outside my calculations. Montaigne dismisses the pursuit of glory, a goal championed by prominent figures like Pliny and Cicero, as incompatible with a life of solitude. He argues that seeking recognition contradicts the peace and seclusion one should aim for in retreat. For Montaigne, true contentment comes from withdrawing from the demands of public life and focusing inwardly, without the distractions of fame or public acclaim. Quote 14. Glory and tranquility cannot dwell in the same lodgings. In this quote, Montaigne emphasizes that the pursuit of fame and the pursuit of inner peace are mutually exclusive. The desire for recognition pulls one back into the turmoil of public life, while tranquility requires stepping away from such distractions. Montaigne suggests that true solitude and contentment come only when one abandons the ambition for public acknowledgement and focuses on personal serenity. Quote 15. It is impossible to give up your pursuits if you do not give up their fruits. Montaigne reflects on the futility of trying to escape worldly responsibilities while still holding on to the rewards they offer. He argues that to truly embrace solitude and peace, one must let go of not only the tasks, but also the ambitions and outcomes that come with them. Without abandoning the desire for rewards, such as fame or wealth, a person remains tethered to the very pursuits they seek to escape. Quote 16. Withdraw into yourself, but first prepare yourself to welcome yourself there. Montaigne advises that solitude, or turning inward, requires readiness. Before seeking isolation, one must ensure that they are mentally and emotionally prepared to face their own company. It is essential to cultivate a sense of self-governance and internal harmony, or else solitude might become unbearable. This preparation allows one to fully embrace solitude with peace and self-sufficiency. Quote 17. If one book wearies me, I take up another, applying myself to it only during those hours when I begin to be gripped by boredom at doing nothing. Montaigne reveals his relaxed approach to reading, stating that he does not force himself to engage with a book that fails to hold his interest. Instead, he shifts to another text when the desire arises, indicating that his reading is motivated by pleasure rather than obligation. This reflects his philosophy of leisure, where intellectual pursuits should be enjoyable rather than burdensome. Quote 18. From books, all I seek is to give myself pleasure by an honorable pastime. Or if I do study, I seek only that branch of learning which deals with knowing myself and which teaches me how to live and die well. Montaigne emphasizes that the primary value he finds in books is personal pleasure and self-improvement. He is not concerned with acquiring knowledge for its own sake, but rather seeks wisdom that can guide him in understanding himself and navigating life's challenges, especially in the realms of living and dying with grace. Quote 19. I want people to see my natural, ordinary stride, however much it wanders off the path. In this statement, Montaigne reveals his preference for authenticity over perfection. He acknowledges that his thinking may meander, but this is a reflection of his genuine nature. He values expressing his thoughts as they come, even if they are not perfectly structured, allowing others to see him as he truly is, rather than presenting a polished facade. Quote 20. I am not prepared to bash my brains for anything, not even for learning's sake, however precious it may be. Montaigne expresses his disinterest in pushing himself too hard in the pursuit of knowledge. While he acknowledges that learning is valuable, he is unwilling to sacrifice his peace of mind or comfort for it. This reflects his broader philosophy of moderation and the importance of living gently, without excessive strain. Quote 21. What I am obliged to answer for is for getting myself tangled up, or if there is any inanity or defect in my reasoning which I do not see. Montaigne admits that he is responsible for the flaws in his reasoning, particularly those he may not recognize. He acknowledges the limitations of his understanding, inviting critique from others who may spot the weaknesses he overlooks. This openness to correction underscores his humility and willingness to learn from his mistakes. Quote 22. Knowledge and truth can lodge within us without judgment. Judgment can do so without them. Indeed, recognizing our ignorance is one of the surest and most beautiful witnesses to our judgment that I can find. Montaigne draws attention to the distinction between knowledge and judgment, arguing that one can possess knowledge without the capacity to judge it properly. Conversely, sound judgment may exist without extensive knowledge. He views the recognition of one's ignorance as a key indicator of good judgment, valuing self-awareness over blind accumulation of facts. Quote 23. If I come across difficult passages in my reading, I never bite my nails over them. After making a charge or two, I let them be. Montaigne reveals his pragmatic approach to difficult texts, stating that he does not dwell on passages he finds challenging. If he cannot grasp something after a few attempts, he moves on rather than obsessing over it. This reflects his broader philosophy of not letting intellectual pursuits become a source of frustration or toil. Quote 24. In general, I ask for books which use learning, not those which trim it up. Montaigne expresses his preference for books that present knowledge straightforwardly, rather than embellishing it with unnecessary rhetoric or ornamentation. He values substance over style and prefers content that offers practical wisdom or insight, rather than flashy language or excessive preparation that might distract from the core message. Quote 25. I would rather have a true account of his chat with his private friends in his tent on the eve of a battle than the oration which he delivered next morning to his army. Montaigne reveals his fascination with the intimate personal moments of historical figures, preferring to learn about their true character through informal settings rather than public speeches or formal displays. This reflects his deeper interest in understanding the inner life and moral integrity of individuals rather than their outward achievements or performances. Quote 26. For as I have said elsewhere, I am uniquely curious about my author's soul and native judgment. Montaigne emphasizes that his primary interest in reading is not merely to absorb facts or learn about events, but to gain insight into the personal thoughts, judgments, and character of the authors. He seeks to understand the human qualities behind the writing, considering the moral and intellectual nature of the writer as important as the content they produce. Quote 27. I like either very simple historians or else outstanding ones. Montaigne expresses a preference for two types of historians: those who present historical facts with simplicity and honesty, allowing readers to make their own judgments, and those who are truly exceptional in their ability to interpret events and present them in a meaningful way. He criticizes mediocre historians who distort facts through their own biases, either oversimplifying or overanalyzing, which diminishes the quality of their work. Quote 28. What can we hope from a doctor who writes about war, or a schoolboy writing about the designs of kings? Montaigne questions the credibility of historians who lack first-hand experience or expertise in the subjects they write about. He argues that history is best written by those who were directly involved in the events they describe or who possess the necessary understanding of those events, rather than by outsiders or amateurs whose perspectives may be flawed or incomplete. Quote 29. To help my defective and treacherous memory a little, I have for some time now adopted the practice of adding at the end of each book the date when I finished reading it, and the general judgment I drew from it. Montaigne admits to his poor memory and describes his method of keeping track of his reading experiences by writing down his thoughts and the date when he finished each book. This practice helps him recall the essence of the text and the impressions it left on him, demonstrating his practical approach to learning and self-reflection. Quote 30. He relates all the various rumors which were current and the differing reports that were made to him. Here is the very stuff of history, naked and unshaped. Montaigne praises the honesty and transparency of certain historians who present history in its raw form. All rumors and reports without filtering or shaping the narrative. He values this approach because it allows readers to engage directly with the material and form their own interpretations, rather than being guided by the historian's personal bias or conclusions. Quote 31. Fortis imaginatio generat causum. A powerful imagination generates the event, as the scholars say. Montaigne introduces the idea that a strong imagination can have real effects on one's life and circumstances. He suggests that what we imagine can manifest in reality, either through physical symptoms or by influencing our actions and outcomes. This highlights the profound impact of the mind on the body and external events, suggesting that thoughts themselves can shape reality. Quote 32. I would rather live among people who are healthy and cheerful. The sight of another man's suffering produces physical suffering in me. Montaigne admits that being around others' suffering affects him deeply, causing him to physically feel their pain. He is so sensitive to the emotions and conditions of those around him that he prefers to surround himself with healthy, cheerful people, as their well-being has a positive impact on his own. This reflects the interconnectedness between individuals and how one's emotional state can be influenced by others. Quote 33. When I contemplate an illness, I seize upon it and lodge it within myself. Montaigne describes how his imagination is so powerful that merely thinking about an illness causes him to feel as if he has it. This demonstrates how the mind can create or amplify physical sensations based on thoughts or fears, reinforcing his idea that the imagination can have tangible effects on the body. Quote 34. Some there are who forestall the hand of their executioners. One man was on the scaffold, being unblindfolded so that his pardon could be read to him, when he fell down dead, the blow being struck by his imagination alone. Montaigne shares a story of a man who died purely from the power of his imagination, even though he was about to be pardoned. This illustrates the immense power of the mind, capable of causing physical death through fear and expectation. It underscores the potential of imagination to cause real harm when it is not controlled. Quote 35. It is likely that the credit given to miracles, visions, enchantments, and such extraordinary events chiefly derives from the power of the imagination acting mainly on the more impressionable souls of the common people. Montaigne suggests that many extraordinary events, such as miracles and visions, are the result of imagination influencing those who are particularly impressionable. He implies that people's beliefs and expectations shape their perceptions of reality, making them more likely to believe in supernatural occurrences due to the power of their minds rather than actual external forces. Quote 36. I know this from the experience of a man whom I can vouch for as though he were myself. There is not the slightest suspicion of sexual inadequacy in his case, nor of magic spells. But he heard one of his comrades tell how an extraordinary impotency fell upon him just when he could least afford it. Montaigne recounts the story of a man who, after hearing about another's experience of impotence, became impotent himself due to the power of suggestion. This demonstrates how the mind can create physical conditions based on fear or expectation, even when there is no actual physical cause, further supporting Montaigne's argument about the influence of imagination. Quote 37. This misfortune is to be feared only in adventures where our souls are immoderately tense with desire and respect. Especially when the opportunity is pressing and unforeseen, there is no means of recovering from this confusion. Montaigne discusses how the intensity of desire and respect can lead to failures, especially in moments of high pressure. When one is overwhelmed by the tension of the moment, the imagination can take over and create obstacles, making recovery from such confusion difficult. This highlights the delicate balance between mental states and performance in crucial situations. Quote 38. Our members have emotions proper to themselves, which arouse them or quieten them down without leave from us. Montaigne observes that the body's various parts have their own impulses and behavior, not always align with our conscious will. He points out how bodily functions, like facial expressions or other involuntary movements, occur beyond our control, reflecting a disconnect between our desires and our physical responses. This suggests that the body often acts independently, guided by its own instincts or reactions. Quote 39. Even when we have nothing for the pot, and would fain order our hunger and thirst not to do so, they never fail to stir up those members which are subject to them, just as that other appetite does. Here, Montaigne compares hunger and thirst to sexual desire, showing how the body's needs and urges arise involuntarily and persist regardless of our attempts to control them. He highlights the unyielding nature of these bodily demands, which continue to influence our actions and emotions despite our best efforts to suppress them. Quote 40. One man, perhaps by the power of his imagination, leaves in France the very scrofula which his fellow then takes back into Spain. Montaigne suggests that the power of imagination can have a profound effect on physical conditions, as one person might seemingly transfer an illness through belief alone. This reflects the idea that the mind's influence on the body is strong enough to create or alleviate symptoms, with the imagination playing a significant role in shaping health outcomes. Quote 41. It is quite a different matter that the imagination should sometimes act not merely upon its own body, but on someone else's. Montaigne explores the possibility that imagination can extend its influence beyond the individual, affecting others physically or emotionally. He reflects on examples where one person's thoughts or emotions seem to impact another's well-being, suggesting that the power of the mind can transcend individual boundaries and interact with others in unexpected ways. Quote 42. There was a woman who believed she had swallowed a pin in her bread. She yelled and screamed as though she felt an insufferable pain in her throat, where she thought she could feel it stuck. In this case, Montaigne illustrates the impact of belief on physical sensation. Even though the woman had not actually swallowed a pin, her imagination caused her to feel pain and distress as if she had. This highlights the mind's ability to create real physical experiences based on imagined scenarios, demonstrating how deeply imagination can influence bodily perception. Quote 43. Even the very beasts are subject to the power of the imagination just as we are. Montaigne notes that animals, like humans, are also influenced by their imagination. He describes how dogs and horses show signs of dreaming or reacting emotionally in their sleep, indicating that they, too, experience the effects of imagination. This connection between human and animal behavior underscores the universal nature of imagination's power over the body. Quote 44. Those who are fond of hawking know the tale of the falconer who fixed his gaze purposefully on a kite as it flew and bet he could bring it down by the sheer power of his sight. This story demonstrates Montaigne's belief in the extraordinary influence of focused willpower and imagination. He recounts how the falconer's intense gaze was said to bring down a bird in flight, suggesting that imagination and concentrated thought can have tangible effects on the external world, even influencing other living beings. Quote 45. I neither like it nor think well of it, even though the world, by common consent, has decided to honor it with special favor. Montaigne expresses his disdain for sadness, a sentiment that society often esteems, associating it with wisdom and virtue. He rejects this view, asserting that sadness is neither admirable nor desirable, despite its widespread reverence. For him, sadness does not embody strength, but is more akin to weakness and harm. Quote 46. The truth is that he was already brimful of sadness, so the least extra burden broke down the barriers of his endurance. Montaigne explains that deep grief can accumulate until even a minor event can overwhelm someone who appears strong. This illustrates how sadness builds silently, and when a person is burdened to their limit, any additional sorrow, however small, can unleash overwhelming emotions, breaking their previous composure. Quote 47. The force of extreme sadness inevitably stuns the whole of our soul, impeding her freedom of action. Montaigne notes how extreme sadness paralyzes the soul, preventing it from functioning freely. When struck by overwhelming grief, a person's ability to act, think, or express themselves is severely hindered. This state of shock leaves the person unable to react, encapsulating them in a kind of emotional numbness. Quote 48. We cannot display our grief or our convictions during the living, searing heat of the attack. The soul is then burdened by deep thought, and the body is cast down, languishing for love. Montaigne observes that during moments of intense emotional pain, particularly in love, people often cannot outwardly express their feelings. The soul is so consumed by the depth of its thoughts and emotions that the body, too, becomes physically drained and weakened, preventing any active display of grief or passion. Quote 49. Violent emotions like these have little hold on me. By nature, my sense of feeling has a hard skin, which I daily toughen and thicken by arguments. Montaigne concludes that strong emotions, whether of grief or joy, do not easily affect him. He attributes this resilience to his natural disposition and his habitual practice of rational argument, which he uses to further insulate himself from emotional extremes. Through reason, he fortifies himself against feelings that might otherwise overwhelm him. Quote 50. The ancients recorded that Diodorus, the dialectician, fell in the field, overcome by an extreme sense of shame at being unable to refute arguments put to him in public in the presence of his followers. Montaigne recounts the story of Diodorus, who died from the shame of failing to counter an argument in front of his students. This illustrates the power of emotions like humiliation, which can be as physically destructive as grief or joy. In this case, the overwhelming shame led to the tragic collapse of Diodorus, showing how emotions can sometimes have fatal consequences. Quote 51. Resolution and constancy do not lay down as a law that we may not protect ourselves, as far as it lies in our power to do so, from the ills and misfortunes which threaten us. Montaigne clarifies that constancy and resolve do not mean that one should passively endure misfortune. Instead, it is both permissible and commendable to take whatever measures possible to avoid or mitigate dangers. True constancy lies in enduring what cannot be avoided with patience and strength, not in refraining from defending oneself when it is possible. Quote 52. The role played by constancy consists chiefly in patiently bearing misfortunes for which there is no remedy. Here, Montaigne emphasizes that the essence of constancy is not in avoiding difficulties, but in accepting and enduring the inevitable with grace. When faced with unchangeable circumstances, the true test of constancy is the ability to bear them without being overwhelmed by fear or despair. Quote 53. Not even the Stoics claim that their sage can resist visual stimuli or ideas when they first come upon him. Montaigne notes that even the Stoics, who advocate for emotional control, acknowledge that initial reactions to external stimuli are unavoidable. What matters is not the instinctive response to sudden shocks or emotions, but whether the rational mind maintains control after the initial reaction, preventing those emotions from taking over one's judgment and behavior. Quote 54. I leave aside simple folk, for whom fear sometimes conjures up visions of their great-grandsires rising out of their graves still wrapped in their shrouds, or else of chimeras, werewolves, or goblins. Montaigne distinguishes between the unreasoned fears of ordinary people and the more rational responses of those who should be less prone to superstition. Yet, he acknowledges that fear can affect all people, sometimes leading to extreme and fantastical visions, showing how fear distorts perception and reasoning. Quote 55. Sometimes fear, as in the first two examples, puts wings on our heels. At others, it hobbles us and nails our feet to the ground. Montaigne illustrates the dual effects of fear. It can either trigger a flight response, making one act quickly to escape, or it can paralyze, preventing any action at all. This duality highlights fear's unpredictable power over both body and mind, capable of either propelling or immobilizing individuals depending on the situation. Quote 56. I have seen many men truly driven out of their minds by fear, and it is certain that, while the fit lasts, fear engenders even in the most staid of men a terrifying confusion. Montaigne observes that fear can have such a profound effect on the mind that it overwhelms even the most composed individuals, causing them to lose their sense of reason and control. During moments of intense fear, rationality is often replaced by confusion and panic, illustrating the powerful hold fear has on human behavior. Quote 57. Fear reveals her greatest power when she drives us to perform in her own service those very deeds of valor, of which she robbed our duty and our honor. Montaigne highlights the paradoxical nature of fear, noting how it can push people to acts of desperation and bravery that stem from the instinct to escape rather than from a sense of duty or honor. In these moments, fear becomes a driving force, compelling individuals to fight fiercely for survival, even as it undermines their courage. Quote 58. It is fear that I am most afraid of. In harshness, it surpasses all other mischances. Montaigne acknowledges that, for him, fear is more devastating than any other misfortune. Fear, in its ability to paralyze and cloud judgment, is seen as a force that can inflict greater suffering than actual harm or danger. This recognition underscores fear's capacity to cause deep emotional and psychological torment. Quote 59. People with a pressing fear of losing their property, or of being driven into exile or enslaved, also lose all desire to eat, drink, or sleep, whereas those who are actually impoverished, banished, or enslaved often enjoy life as much as anyone else. Montaigne contrasts the effects of fear with the reality of suffering, showing that the anticipation of loss or harm often brings greater anguish than the actual experience of hardship. Those consumed by fear of what might happen are often more distressed than those who are already enduring the feared circumstances, suggesting that fear magnifies the imagined pain. Quote 60. And many people, unable to withstand the stabbing pains of fear, have hanged themselves, drowned themselves, or jumped to their deaths, showing us that fear is even more importunate and unbearable than death. Montaigne provides a stark example of fear's devastating power, explaining that some individuals find fear so unbearable that they choose death over enduring it. This demonstrates that the psychological suffering caused by fear can be more overwhelming than the fear of death itself, leading people to seek escape through suicide. Quote 61. Such fear can sometimes take hold of a great crowd. Montaigne reflects on the contagious nature of fear, noting that it can spread quickly through groups, affecting entire communities or armies. Once fear takes hold, it creates mass panic and confusion, leading to irrational and dangerous actions as individuals react impulsively to the collective terror surrounding them. Quote 62. Such outbursts are called panic terrors. Montaigne uses this term to describe sudden, overwhelming bouts of fear that can strike without warning and spread through entire populations. These panic terrors are characterized by chaos and confusion, where people act without reason, driven by an uncontrollable sense of dread, often linked to divine or supernatural causes. Quote 63. It is a pleasant thought to imagine a mind exactly poised between two parallel desires, for it would indubitably never reach a decision, since making a choice implies that there is an inequality of value. Montaigne reflects on the idea of a mind caught between two equal desires, suggesting that such a situation would lead to indecision. He explains that choice depends on perceiving one option as more valuable than the other. Without this distinction, the mind would remain stuck, unable to act, highlighting the necessity of preference or inequality in decision-making. Quote 64. It seems to me that we could say that nothing ever presents itself to us in which there is not some difference, however slight. Either to sight or to touch, there is always an additional something which attracts us, even though we may not perceive it. Montaigne proposes that even when things appear identical, there is always some small difference that influences our choice. These distinctions may not be obvious to us, but they exist and sway our decisions. This insight suggests that what may seem like arbitrary decisions are actually guided by subtle influences beyond our conscious awareness. Quote 65. It is not in nature for it all to break at once. Here, Montaigne uses the metaphor of a cord to illustrate the idea that things do not collapse all at once. Just as a cord begins to fray in one spot before breaking, so too do events and situations unravel gradually rather than suddenly. This reflects his view that there is always a starting point or weakness in any breakdown, whether physical or mental. Quote 66. There is nothing certain except that nothing is certain, and nothing more wretched than man, nor more arrogant. Quoting Pliny, Montaigne expresses the paradox of human existence. Despite our pursuit of certainty, nothing is ever truly certain. He points out that humans are both miserable in their ignorance and yet arrogant in their desire to know and control everything. This highlights the limits of human knowledge and the futility of seeking absolute certainty in a world full of uncertainties. Quote 67. So wondrous is the power of conscience. It makes us betray, accuse, and fight against ourselves. Montaigne highlights the profound influence of conscience, emphasizing its ability to make individuals turn against themselves. He suggests that the guilt or fear in one's mind can lead to self-betrayal, even when external forces or accusations are absent. Conscience becomes an internal tormentor, revealing secrets and creating inner conflict that no one else might be aware of. Quote 68. To expect punishment is to suffer it. To merit it is to expect it. Montaigne expresses the idea that the anticipation of punishment is itself a form of suffering. When someone knows they deserve punishment, the dread and expectation of it become a source of ongoing torment. This reflection underscores the role of guilt and fear in creating psychological pain, even before any real consequences occur. Quote 69. Conscience can fill us with fear, but she can also fill us with assurance and confidence. Montaigne observes that while conscience can torment us with fear and guilt, it provides a sense of inner peace and confidence when we are sure of our innocence. The conscience serves both as a judge and a source of comfort, depending on how one has acted, offering a dual role in shaping human behavior. Quote 70. Torture is a dangerous innovation. It would appear that it is an essay not of the truth, but of a man's endurance. Montaigne critiques the use of torture, arguing that it tests not the truthfulness of the accused, but their ability to withstand pain. He questions the effectiveness of torture in obtaining genuine confessions, as both the guilty and innocent might either conceal or falsely confess under extreme duress. This reflection casts doubt on the justice of torture as a method of truth-seeking. Quote 71. What would you not say, what would you not do, to avoid such grievous pain? Montaigne illustrates the lengths to which individuals will go to escape the suffering of torture. He points out that the overwhelming fear of pain can lead people to say or do anything, even lie, to bring the torment to an end. This highlights the unreliability of confessions obtained under such circumstances, as the motivation to avoid pain outweighs the desire for truth. Quote 72. Pain compels even the innocent to lie. Montaigne succinctly summarizes the flaw in torture. The innocent, in their desperation to avoid further pain, may falsely confess to crimes they did not commit. This reinforces his argument that torture cannot reliably reveal the truth, as the fear of suffering can distort honesty and force false admissions. Quote 73. You are the unjust one, are you not? Who do worse than kill a man so as not to kill him without due cause. Montaigne condemns the practice of torturing individuals whose guilt is still in doubt, suggesting that it is more cruel to inflict unnecessary suffering on someone than to mistakenly kill them without proof. He argues that such actions reveal the injustice of those who administer torture, questioning the morality of causing intense suffering under the guise of justice. Quote 74. No passion disturbs the soundness of our judgment as anger does. Montaigne asserts that anger is the most disruptive emotion to clear thinking and rational judgment. When someone is consumed by anger, their ability to see situations clearly and make fair decisions is compromised, leading to distorted perceptions and irrational actions. This highlights the destructive power of anger over the mind. Quote 75. While our pulse is beating and we can feel the emotion, let us put off the encounter. Things will really and truly look different to us once we have cooled off a bit and quietened down. Montaigne advises that decisions, especially those involving punishment or conflict, should not be made in the heat of anger. He emphasizes the importance of waiting until emotions have subsided, as anger distorts perception, and once calm, the situation will likely appear less severe, leading to more measured actions. Quote 76. Faults seen through anger are like objects seen through a mist. They appear larger. Montaigne uses a powerful metaphor to explain how anger exaggerates the faults and wrongs we perceive. Just as mist distorts vision, anger magnifies problems, making them seem bigger and more serious than they actually are, leading to overreactions and misplaced judgment. Quote 77. Am I all a-tremble? Am I shaking with wrath? Those, I can tell you, are the true symptoms of anger. Plutarch, as retold by Montaigne, explains the physical signs of anger, such as trembling and loss of control, which differentiate true anger from mere frustration or discipline. This underscores that real anger manifests not just in speech, but in uncontrollable bodily reactions, revealing the depth of the emotion. Quote 78. Anger is a passion which delights in itself and fawns on itself. Montaigne observes that anger is a self-perpetuating emotion, feeding off its own intensity. Once it takes hold, it grows stronger, and people often indulge in it, finding a strange satisfaction in their rage, even when it harms themselves or others. This suggests that anger can be addictive and difficult to escape from once it is embraced. Quote 79. By hiding our choler, we drive it into our bodies. Montaigne warns that suppressing anger instead of expressing it can cause internal harm. Repressing anger doesn't make it disappear. Instead, it festers inside, leading to stress and emotional damage. This highlights the importance of finding a healthy outlet for anger, rather than letting it build up internally. Quote 80. When I get angry, it is as lively, but also as short and as secret as I can make it. Montaigne describes his approach to anger, acknowledging that while he may experience it intensely, he strives to keep it brief and controlled. He values expressing his anger quickly and privately, avoiding prolonged outbursts or public displays, which helps him manage the emotion without letting it dominate him or others. Quote 81. But only spasmodically. Sometimes there is in the lives of those heroes in ancient times miraculous flashes which appear far to exceed our natural powers. But, truly, flashes they are. Montaigne reflects that even the most extraordinary acts of virtue or heroism are often momentary and fleeting. These bursts of exceptional behavior seem to transcend human nature, but are not sustainable in the long term. He suggests that such acts are not a constant state, but rather brief, almost miraculous exceptions to the usual limitations of human capacity. Quote 82. That is why the wise men say that to judge a man properly, we must principally look at his routine activities and surprise him in his everyday dress. Montaigne emphasizes the importance of observing someone in their ordinary daily life to truly understand their character. While grand gestures or extraordinary acts may be impressive, it is a person's habitual behavior in mundane situations that reveals their true nature. This reflection highlights the value of consistency in character over occasional flashes of virtue. Quote 83. Now, it is one thing to bring your soul to accept such ideas. It is quite another to combine theory and practice. Montaigne points out the significant gap between intellectual acceptance of philosophical ideas and the practical application of those ideas in real life. While it may be easy to understand or agree with certain philosophical principles, it is much harder to live by them consistently, showing the challenge of translating theory into action. Quote 84. What makes it a miracle is that stable, lifelong premeditation. Montaigne marvels at the idea that some acts, especially those involving self-sacrifice, are not spontaneous, but the result of a lifetime of premeditation and commitment. This sustained dedication to a belief or principle is what elevates these actions to the level of miracles, as they require unwavering constancy and resolution over time. Quote 85. For if our hour is bound to come at a particular point, neither volleys from enemy harquebuses, nor our own rashness, nor our running away, nor our cowardice, can advance it or retard it. Here, Montaigne explores the concept of fate, suggesting that if our destiny is predetermined, no action, whether brave or cowardly, can change the appointed time of our death. This fatalistic perspective implies that human actions, whether reckless or cautious, have no power to alter the course of destiny. Quote 86. What did he have to do? beyond galloping back to his friends across a river. Montaigne comments on the irrationality of a failed assassin who, after completing his task, did not take the obvious action of escaping across a river. This moment of confusion and inaction reveals the fragility of the mind under extreme pressure, showing how even simple decisions can become impossible when overwhelmed by the magnitude of the event. Quote 87. The motives for such a powerful conviction may well be various, since our faculty of perception does with us, and with itself, whatever it likes. Montaigne reflects on how human perception can shape our beliefs and convictions in unpredictable ways. He suggests that the mind can bend reason to fit various justifications, leading individuals to act based on their perceptions, even when those perceptions are shaped by irrational or deeply personal beliefs. This highlights the complexity of human motivation and decision-making. Quote 88. Reason ordains that we should keep to the same road, but not to the same rate. And although the wise man must never allow his human passions to make him stray from the right path, he may, without prejudice to his duty, certainly quicken or lessen his speed. Montaigne suggests that while reason guides us to stay on the correct path in life, it allows for flexibility in our pace. A wise person can adjust their actions without abandoning their principles. The idea is to remain true to one's values, but understand that life may require changes in speed or intensity depending on the circumstances. Quote 89. I have noted as something quite rare the sight of great persons who remain so utterly unmoved when engaged in high enterprises and in affairs of some moment that they do not even cut short their sleep. Montaigne observes that it is rare for people to remain completely calm and unaffected, even during crucial moments in their lives. He admires those who can stay composed to the point where they do not even alter their normal routines, such as sleep, in the face of significant challenges or responsibilities, as it reflects a profound inner peace and confidence. Quote 90. On the day appointed for his desperate battle against Darius, Alexander the Great slept so soundly and so late that when the hour of battle was pressing close, Parmenion was obliged to enter his chamber and call out his name 2 or 3 times to wake him up. Montaigne recounts how Alexander the Great remained so calm before a critical battle that he slept deeply, needing to be woken up by his general. This story illustrates Alexander's extraordinary composure and trust in his abilities, as he was not disturbed by the impending conflict, a sign of both confidence and self-assurance. Quote 91. Cato was ready to take his own life. He was waiting for news, when he fell into so deep a sleep that his breathing could be heard in the neighboring room. Montaigne describes Cato's ability to fall into a deep sleep, even while awaiting news that would determine whether he would take his own life. This illustrates Cato's remarkable calmness and detachment from the dire circumstances surrounding him, demonstrating a stoic acceptance of his fate. Quote 92. But, to turn to young Marius, he did worse, for on the day of his last encounter with Sylla, he drew up his army, gave the signal for battle, then went to lie down for a rest in the shade of a tree where he fell so fast asleep that he could scarcely be awakened by the rout of his fleeing soldiers. Montaigne criticizes the actions of young Marius, who fell asleep during a crucial battle and missed the entire engagement. This contrasts with the admirable calmness of others, as Marius's sleep was driven by exhaustion and carelessness, leading to disaster, which shows that sleep, when taken at the wrong moment, can be a sign of negligence rather than composure. Quote 93. Herodotus mentions nations where men sleep and wake a half-year at a time, and the biographer of Epimenides the Wise says that he slept for 57 years in a row. Montaigne refers to these extraordinary accounts of prolonged sleep, drawing attention to the curious and almost mythical power that sleep holds in some stories. These examples highlight how sleep is often viewed with fascination, symbolizing both a necessary and mysterious force that governs life in strange ways. Quote 94. What madness it is to expect to die of that failing of our powers brought on by extreme old age, and to make that the target for our life to reach when it is the least usual, the rarest kind of death. Montaigne questions the common expectation of living to an advanced age and dying of old age. He argues that it is irrational to aim for such a rare and uncommon form of death, given the many other causes of death that frequently cut life short. This reflection encourages a more realistic acceptance of life's fragility and uncertainty. Quote 95. Dying of old age is a rare death, unique and out of the normal order, and therefore less natural than the others. Montaigne asserts that dying of old age is, in fact, an extraordinary event, making it less natural than other, more frequent causes of death. He challenges the conventional wisdom that sees death by old age as the most natural, emphasizing that life is typically ended by other forces long before old age is reached. Quote 96. Since we have crossed the accustomed limits, and that constitutes the real measure of our days, we ought not to hope to get much farther beyond them. Montaigne suggests that once a person surpasses the typical life expectancy of their time, they should not expect to live much longer. Having already avoided many of the usual dangers and accidents that claim most lives, any additional years are considered a rare fortune, not something to be relied upon or expected. Quote 97. Personally, I reckon that our souls are free from their bonds at the age of 20, as they ought to be, and that by then they show promise of all they are capable of. Montaigne believes that by the age of 20, a person's character and abilities are fully formed. He argues that after this age, individuals have already demonstrated the extent of their potential, and any new developments are unlikely to surpass what has already been shown. This view implies that youth is the time when a person's true nature is revealed. Quote 98. Of all the fair deeds of men in ancient times, and in our own which have come to my knowledge, of whatever kind they may be, I think it would take me longer to enumerate those which were made manifest before the age of 30 than after. Montaigne observes that most of the significant achievements he knows of occurred before the age of 30. He suggests that youthful vigor and creativity often drive great deeds, and that as people age, they are less likely to accomplish feats of similar magnitude. This reinforces his belief in the power and importance of youth. Quote 99. But now I am complaining not that the laws allow us to work so late, but that they are so late in putting us to work. Montaigne criticizes the tendency of society to delay the start of meaningful work and responsibility. He argues that people should be given the opportunity to contribute and engage in productive activities earlier in life, rather than postponing important roles until later, when their abilities might already be in decline. Quote 100. It may well be that, for those who make good use of their time, knowledge and experience grow with the years, but vitality, quickness, firmness, and other qualities which are more truly our own, and more important, more ours by their essence, droop and fade. Montaigne acknowledges that while wisdom and experience may increase with age, the qualities that define a person's true essence, such as energy, decisiveness, and strength, diminish over time. He highlights the tension between intellectual growth and physical decline, emphasizing the fleeting nature of the qualities that make us most ourselves. Quote 101. We ought to consider when judging such events how our souls are often shaken by conflicting emotions. Montaigne reminds us that when we experience strong, conflicting emotions, our reactions can be complex and unpredictable. He suggests that we often feel multiple emotions simultaneously, such as joy and sorrow, and these can shape how we respond to events, even when the situation seems to call for only one emotion. Quote 102. That is why we can see that not only children, who artlessly follow nature, often weep and laugh at the same thing, but that not one of us either can boast that no matter how much he may want to set out on a journey, he still does not feel his heart a tremble when he says goodbye to family and friends. Montaigne reflects on how even adults, like children, can experience joy and sadness simultaneously. He uses the example of leaving for a journey, where the excitement of the adventure is accompanied by the sadness of parting from loved ones. This reveals the natural coexistence of contradictory emotions in human experiences. Quote 103. And however noble the passion which inflames the heart of a well-born bride, she still has to have her arms prized from her mother's neck before being given to her husband. Montaigne describes how, even in moments of great happiness, such as a wedding, conflicting emotions are present. A bride may feel deep love and joy, but still experience sadness in leaving her family. This tension between two strong emotions highlights the complexity of human feelings, even during life's happiest moments. Quote 104. When I rail at my manservant, I do so sincerely with all my mind. My curses are real, not feigned. But once I cease to fume, if he needs help from me, I am glad to help him. I turn over the page. Montaigne acknowledges that his anger is genuine when it arises, but it quickly fades, and he is just as willing to help the person he was angry with moments before. This demonstrates the transient nature of emotions and the ability to move on from intense feelings without holding grudges, showing how emotions shift rapidly. Quote 105. If anyone should think when he sees me, sometimes look bleakly at my wife, and sometimes lovingly, that either emotion is put on, then he is daft. Montaigne dismisses the idea that expressing both positive and negative emotions toward the same person is insincere. He asserts that both are genuine and natural, reflecting the normal ebb and flow of emotions in close relationships. This shows that true emotions can coexist without contradiction. Quote 106. Our soul darts its arrows separately, but imperceptibly. Montaigne compares the shifting of emotions to arrows shot one after another, but so rapidly that the change is barely noticeable. This metaphor illustrates how quickly emotions can change and how subtle these shifts can be, often happening without our full awareness, yet profoundly influencing our responses. Quote 107. He first felt a quiver of joy at seeing so many thousands of men devoted to his service. Then, all of a sudden, his thoughts turned to all those lives which would wither in 100 years at most. He knit his brow and was saddened to tears. Montaigne recounts how Xerxes, seeing his vast army, experienced both pride and sadness in quick succession. This moment highlights the human ability to feel opposing emotions almost simultaneously, with joy turning into sorrow as the mind shifts its focus, showing the complex and rapid changes in our emotional states. On Solitude, by Michel de Montaigne, concludes with a powerful message about the importance of knowing oneself and maintaining inner balance in a world driven by external pressures. Montaigne emphasizes that true solitude is not merely physical isolation, but an internal state where one is at peace with oneself, regardless of the surroundings. By advocating for mental and emotional detachment from societal obligations and expectations, Montaigne encourages readers to find contentment and resilience within themselves. His reflections offer timeless guidance on how to live a balanced life, reminding us that solitude is not about escaping the world, but about finding freedom and strength in our own minds.
Curious to dive into the mind of Michel de Montaigne? With StudyLab Pro's book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of On Solitude in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.